right, hello and welcome to Feedback. This is a place where people get together and inform you about things that you need to know about video games. Things that happened last week, things that may have happened last year. You can only find out if we're going to talk about them if you watch this entire show. So, watch. Anyway, I'm very glad to be joined by the wonderful people on the G4 editorial crew. Sterling McGarvey.
Hi there.
Andrew Pfister. And Patrick Klepek.
It's very rainy today.
It's
cold.
It is.
Very cold.
It's a strange, rare day of cold and wet in
I
Los
did not
Angeles.
move to LA to experience San Francisco.
Yeah, this sucks.
Yes, but since I miss San Francisco so much, it's like, oh yeah, I don't miss San Francisco.
It's actually cute to see years and years of like motor oil spilling up all along the curves as it's bubbling up.
As it splashes on you as the car drives by.
It's also worth pointing out, it's kind of drizzling, yet every streetlight seems to have completely crapped out because it's just that's the kind of terror that moisture brings to this city.
It's cute though. Like rain in LA reminds me of like when it snows in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta for about 12 years. Every time it snowed, everybody's like, "Oh God,
Get the
buy
city
most
plow out."
perishable things possible."
Sterling, I'm pretty sure it's cute when you can walk to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Cute.
I don't know about everyone else.
Well, they can all curse me as they're watching this. Whatever, it's fine.
All right, so enough about the weather. Number 2 to freeways in terms of popular Los Angeles discussions, but moving on to what's far more fascinating for all of us involved, and that is games. And we're going to start off once again with news. One would think with everything that's been going on with game releases this week that there'd be a lot of news, Patrick, but this has been a little bit more on the late side.
No, yeah, there's really not a whole lot going on, but Sony is having trouble keeping things in the dark. They've had 2 leaks recently.
Sony having leaks?
I know. But ironically, these don't seem to have been their fault. Like in one case, we have Infamous 2, where actor David Sullivan, who is the star in an indie sci-fi film Primer, which you haven't seen, it's on Netflix streaming. I highly recommend you check it out.
All right.
He's auditioning. He put on Twitter that he's auditioning for the role of Cole McGrath, who is the main character in Infamous. And it seems like they're recasting it. And he was tweeting, in a seemingly intentional way of trying to get out the word that he was auditioning for Infamous 2. And Sony issued us a really brief, no comment. We're not talking about the future of the Infamous franchise using the word franchise. And then, but the actor then had to remove everything from his Twitter account, obviously, as well, saying, at first he changed it to, I was auditioning for a role in a high-profile video game, I hope I get it, and then was also asked to take that down and replaced it with an oops, and now it just says that I will let you know about auditions that are not private when I can tell you.
I have a feeling this guy's not going to get the job.
Maybe not. I noticed how well that worked for Fable 3. When they made the whole announcement over Twitter. Whoops. Yeah, you don't get to take that back.
Just to clarify, he did say it was for a video game. So anyone who might be thinking that he could be auditioning for the role of Cole McGrath in an Infamous
I mean, he
movie.
specifically said it's for like a motion capture and a voice. Like, I mean, he would theoretically would be involved in both of these. So it sounds like either they're recasting Cole McGrath, the previous actor who played him in the first game, which I didn't have strong feelings towards for or against. It felt like Batman Redux, so like I would be okay with a recasting, but. Yeah, I mean, he did tell me my story about it that I broke eventually got back to him over Twitter, and he replied to me saying, "Thanks, it went great." So,
oh well,
way to go.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I know many a good actor who's so neurotic coming out of an audition that even I don't know could still turn out to get the role. So if you think it went well. Maybe Mr. Sullivan, could have the role.
More power to him, I guess.
So let's move on to the second leak.
This is probably the more interesting one, which is so they're filming Battle for Los Angeles, which is this Aaron Eckhart sci-fi.
Michelle Rodriguez
film.
too. She's a corporal.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. But some pictures from the set came out, and there was a giant banner for Resistance 3. And in the Resistance 3 logo is the Statue of Liberty. So it's seemingly that there will be. Part of the game will take place in New York, even though Resistance 2 had the Golden Gate Bridge and there was only one level in San Francisco. So, but at least we can assume so much that Resistance 3 is coming. There will be a level set in New York,
and it's moving further east into the United States,
apparently,
which is weird considering how it ended. Like, yeah. I guess it was kind of the where are we? I think we're in Mexico.
Yeah, it was. I mean, things definitely went kind of higgledy-piggledy at the end of Resistance 2, story-wise. Yeah. But this is for a movie, and this is what I love. It's called Battle Los Angeles. But they were shooting it in Shreveport, Louisiana, not in Los Angeles.
What?
So, yeah.
Maybe the battle moves to Louisiana for some reason.
Then it should be called Battle from Los Angeles to Louisiana.
I think the lesson from all of this is obviously these are leaks with air quotes, and like big air quotes. Infamous was a very good game that sold respectably on the PS3. Resistance is one of the more established franchises on the PS3. Yet there's always this need, not just from Sony, but from all of these publishers, that kind of obvious business decisions have to be kept under wraps as if like, oh, this is like trade secret here.
Which doesn't happen like in any other medium. Like in movies, the moment that, you know, a movie is a success, they're looking to spit out the press release about the sequel and put a date on it so that they can stamp their place the week after. Like the moment you know it's a success, you just assume there's going to be a Resistance 3 and an Infamous 2. But for whatever reason, the games industry has like a real problem with talking about that stuff, even though it's all so assumed.
Now, is it to an extent that, you know, we're so malleable and so easily manipulated because we need to have these blog posts, all that stuff, that they can, you know, they're kind of waiting for this special moment because we'll actually turn it into big coverage? I mean, is this because we're pawns in their game?
Well, they do like to fragment coverage. It's getting more and more fragmented. Like they'll have special press events just to show one level, one multiplayer level. That's happening this week for an unnamed company. It's getting more ridiculous.
Yeah, I just have to say, like, it really is obvious. Be proud of your product and not cagey about something that we would like and you would probably like to see the revenue from.
But, you know, I think it probably is to your point of, and to what you're alluding to, is that, yeah, they cannot say anything because we're going to talk about it anyway. So what's the point in announcing it when you can get a bunch of, like, really fun speculative posts all over the place? You're going to get more out of speculation than you're going to get out of official fact.
I'll say it works a hell of a lot better than all I want for Christmas is a PSP.
All right, good point. You've had it there. But you know what, Sony? You've had enough of our attention on these false leaks that may have been
There's one
intentional.
more interesting thing about this. Battle for Los Angeles, scheduled for release in early 2011. If Resistance 3, that kind of hints at it being 2011, that kind of throws off Insomniac's like year schedule. So maybe they're putting a little extra oomph into 3.
That's true. And, of course, all I can think of is in that horrible movie with Will Smith and there were zombies.
Horrible
there were vampires.
movie, Will Smith.
There were zombie vampires.
That doesn't make sense.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But they had the false billboards for Batman versus Superman.
Right.
And like that was the one entertaining thing. That's the only thing that worries me because I want to see another Resistance game. So I hope this is one of those.
We'll see
stunts.
another Resistance game.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, let's move on to story number 2.
Which is that Dragon Age, BioWare is... it seems with Dragon Age is trying to avoid what happened with Mass Effect, which is promising a bunch of downloadable content and not delivering. With Dragon Age, they're promising... executive producer Mark Dara told thegamereviews.com that they're planning 2 years of downloadable content. Now, it seems they haven't explicitly figured out what all that DLC is, but the plan is, and the way they've been talking up Dragon Age as a platform and using that terminology is that they want to have this is a 2-year Dragon Age platform, and they're talking about they're gonna. There was a quote from the interview that said it's going to be everything from really small stuff like item packs up to larger quests that might last an hour or two to even fully fledged expansion packs. It's a broad, long-term support plan for the game, and I hope they follow up on this, unlike Mass Effect, where the DLC was poorly implemented into the game to the point if you finished the game, you had to go to previous save points to access the content, and then. Furthering that, it seems like they realized that after the game shipped and then just scrapped all plans for downloadable content and just moved it all to Mass Effect 2, which was really disappointing because I was looking forward to them. It seemed like with Mass Effect, they sort of rushed through the side quest stuff of the game, and I was hoping that it would at least come back in DLC, and it never happened.
I think maybe something has to do with that. That Mass Effect 2 seems to be the Mass Effect that was promised before Mass Effect was released. That they kind of saw their own limitations and went, why not try to, fit things into something that wasn't 100% what we wanted. Let's just focus on the new, shinier product.
And the screw up with the Mass Effect downloadable content is kind of understandable when you consider that it came out like right as we were just getting into downloadable content and what it meant, and people are still trying to figure it out. So maybe now they've seen what's happened and they have a plan.
I think there's been enough proof of concept now that if you have like a high-profile role-playing game, it's almost becoming a given that you're going to have support, post-launch. I mean, you look at what Bethesda's done with Oblivion. You look at what they've done with Fallout and what BioWare was trying to do with Mass Effect. I think, they've extrapolated those lessons learned from Mass Effect, and hopefully we'll see better results out of Dragon Age and hopefully even better out of Mass Effect 2.
Now, is this partially when you look at, the big fear about the announcement of Left 4 Dead 2, and when we see this with a lot of other games, that now there's such an expectation of DLC that, if you don't, if you just have a good game and no DLC, that you're actually hurting yourself because now people have this even higher expectation that I'm not just getting your game, I'm getting all these other things that are going to be coming on down the line. Are they feeding into that? And possibly, are there developers that are actually holding back content that was intended for the initial release, only to release it as DLC to give the illusion that they're doing that kind of support?
That is such a loaded question.
I mean, I think it depends. I mean, if you take the argument that you've seen with previous games developers have said, look, we cut this stuff and you would have never seen it unless we said, look, let's spin it off into DLC. And I don't have a problem with that. I think it's not a matter of if it's cut during main development and brought us to DLC. It's, do you feel it was worth the price? Is it a worthy addition to the game? Were you happy with the experience you got with the box product? And I'll be curious what happens with Dragon Age 2, because I bought every single Fallout 3 DLC. I've put in 85 plus hours into that game, and I loved all the DLC. I bought Mothership Zeta, the last DLC, but I still haven't played it because by the time I downloaded, I actually had Fallout fatigue. And that's a full year later, which is a large testament to it, but that's still pulled off with Fallout 3. But when I look at 2 years of DLC, as great as that sounds, I struggle to find where any game where the DLC is only adding new loot, new missions, new side quests, that I'm still going to want to play that game.
Well, you have to kind of approach it with like a mini MMO mentality. You know,
yeah,
you need that. Like WoW has been going for 5 years now, and another expansion is coming. So if you look at it like a self-contained little mini MMO offline game, then yeah, you can kind of pace yourself and not get fatigued like that.
But is it with an MMO though? You're paying a subscription and you're getting free content in addition to like these large expansion packs. Whereas presumably with Dragon Age, it's going to be doled out in sort of little specific bits. Like with the launch stuff, they have 3 DLC in the beginning. They have the Stone Prisoner, which is a playable stone golem character with his own backstory and quests. They have the Warden's Keep, which is a new dungeon. And then they have the Blood Dragon Armor, which is actually a pretty unique approach to DLC because it's free DLC, but the only way you get access to it is if you buy a new copy of the game. If you buy a used copy of the game, presumably if the person who bought that will have already used the code inside the game. So that's kind of their one way they're approaching, like kind of curbing used game sales, at least in the beginning, because it's going to have a little code in the beginning. And as soon as that's used, yeah, you can buy the game used, but you're not going to get the Blood Dragon Armor.
Well, that's what EA's been doing with their sports games now for over a year. That was part of why they introduced a lot of the dynamic updates. They said, okay, here's your free trial. You redeem this. But if somebody buys a used copy, they're going to have to cough up like $20 to get this mode.
It really is, though. Of all the answers in movies and music as to used sales, this is the best resolution. You're not trying to like shut down the warehouse like Garth Brooks was doing 15 years ago. You're actually saying, well, we need to actually give an incentive, and that incentive would be added value, and it's coming as DLC. It is probably one of the best solutions. I think I'm interested as far as 2 years and whether or not Dragon Age can support that. I mean, this game is dynamic. That I've already had from the experiences I've had with it. But is it so dynamic that you can keep on replaying it and get something all that fresh? That's because you can't play it just for the DLC. I think with this game, it's
right.
Like, okay, if I boot up a new character, can I do one that will have such a unique experience and I get the DLC with it? That's the real incentive.
And there's also a question of like how that's going to be implemented, because Dragon Age is structured so differently than sort of a Mass Effect or any other BioWare or any RPG in general, because you have these 6 origin quests, which, assuming like the way they've portrayed the game is that it's 6 different ways to play through the game. So if I buy one piece of DLC, does that not apply based on where I am in the game according to that character's origin story? Like, there's a lot of stuff that isn't. I mean, I suppose that'll be answered starting with Warden's Keep, but I'll be interested to see how that's actually implemented, because that was the big misstep with Mass Effect. And with Dragon Age, like the way they fractured the game and splintered the way the storyline fractures off, I'm going to be very curious to see how that's executed, because easy access to DLC is like a big incentive to why I would always jump into it in Fallout, because I downloaded it, I get into the game, I get a little radio message that says I can access the new content, but no rush. Like, as soon as you want it, just head in that direction, and it boots up, it takes you to a separate area. So I'll be curious to see, because like they can't really learn lessons from Dragon Age from Mass Effect 2. Whatever their plan is for Dragon Age is the plan for Mass Effect 2. And I'll be curious to see how that happens.
Okay, let's. I don't want to linger too long, but story number 3 kind of makes my heart sink. So just say it and get it over with.
We Play is the best-selling game of the past decade, according to NPD data released to IGN UK. And furthermore, when I was doing a little bit more research, it appears that We Play worldwide has sold almost 23 million copies. In North America alone, it sold 11.1. And that's only since 2007.
I know. And let's look at some of the stuff that's also come out in this past decade. That's Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and Vice City. Wii Fit, obviously, but Mario Kart Wii. It's shocking.
It's shocking. It's the controller.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why doesn't when they have a game that comes with a 360 controller, I'm sure it'll sell boatloads, even if it's a 360 controller with like a downloadable game that's like
but this was
barely what the vouchers.
I mean, I think it spiked in sales when it was really hard to get a controller.
Yes.
And, I've always been one to not want to, buy into conspiracy theories such as, because Nintendo's always been accused of withholding stuff from the marketplace to try to jack up the price, stimulate excitement. In this case, I'm almost slightly suspicious because we play as a game it just wasn't that good. And yes, it came with a controller. It was during a period of time that was very hard to get an extra controller.
Well, I think you probably have legitimacy to the conspiracy theory early on, but I think eventually it just became word of mouth of, well, if you want to get a new controller, go get Wii Play, and that just sustained after. I mean, there might have been a brief period where they played with the numbers a little bit to manipulate that idea, but at a certain point, they weren't doing that anymore, and it was still selling like crazy. So it just became institutionalized that if you want a new controller, just go pick up Wii Play. It gives you some games.
30 minutes for the family.
Not just that, but if you look at it totally from a retailer's perspective, it's perfect for them because it means, as much as retailers and gaming retailers are so obsessed with units per transaction, it means you sell a Wii, you train your salespeople to sell a nunchuck and a copy of Wii Play, and boom, you've got a 3.0 UPT.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I mean, does this also say something about the average Wii consumer that it does seem like it's a little bit less informed. I mean, Mario Galaxy should be on this list. That is, by and far, in my mind, the strongest game that we've seen for the Wii so far, and it's nowhere even close.
No, and in fact, if you look at, I was looking at Wikipedia, which I have to take a little bit with a grain of salt, but like you can get some generalized numbers about where games stand in sort of an all-time standing, and literally Wii Play is like the best-selling game of all time on a worldwide basis at 23 million copies. And if you go down the all-time list, it's just Nintendo game. It goes Wii Play, Nintendogs, Wii Fit, and then you don't get to a non-Nintendo game of the last generation, the Wii DS generation, until number 9, which is San Andreas, which has roughly 17 million copies sold worldwide.
Well,
it's just insane.
I know we poo-poo the Wii, but it still, I think, is a phenomenon just borne out by this. All right, let's talk about things that seem to be right in the world. We'll
let the commentators take the rest of that discussion. Yeah. I'm sure they'll do a great job with it.
All right. Yes, one thing that I think is right with the world is, it happened this week, the release of Uncharted 2. Of course, we got a chance to review that, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Something like that.
The greatest single-player experience of all time.
And of course, I've been eating Dookie. I knew I would probably have to by saying that, but it really was how I felt. And look, I have a feeling most of you guys liked it, but Sterling, what was your impression of the game?
Hands down. I don't know about ever. I always like to carve out a little niche for the future, but it was definitely the best single player game I've played all year. Hands down. I think Naughty Dog's attention to detail and just their storytelling. I love the fact that when they take you out of the game for a cutscene, it's always something to drive the story, and everything else they put in the hands of the player. If they wanted that level of control, even over the cutscenes, then you'd be getting into like BioWare, Quantic Dream territory. But for the action, the way they set everything up, the way the gameplay flows as smoothly as it does between the platforming, between the shooting and the storytelling, nobody's touching them this year so far.
All right, Andrew?
For me, it was the blend of the cinematic storytelling and how well they did that. One thing that really struck me is like how close it is, obviously, to Indiana Jones and those traditional adventure movies. And something I just came to mind is the MacGuffin. If you don't know what that is, it's the plot device that's not really part of the story, but it keeps everyone moving. And the way they handled it in Uncharted just allowed the characters to breathe so well. And it's a very adult game, but not adult in the sense of like sex and blood and guts and violence. It's just the characters are realistic in that action movie context. Like you buy into it.
I mean, really, I always found that a lot of the dialogue, and I think I put this in the review, is that we see in a lot of games, everyone's standing around talking as if they know there's a camera there. And so everything just had this highly demonstrative and important quality. In this, it was just far more casual. And the funniest lines are funny because they're not being delivered as if the characters themselves know it's a funny line. They're these wonderful throwaways. But Patrick, what was your take on Uncharted?
It's an incredibly depressing game if you're a developer, because the bar that they have set in almost every respect for this game. I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the more nuanced stuff, because this game is kind of like you just bought like a brand new, really nice car, and the little dents, the little scratches stand out exponentially more as a result of how the high bar they've set for every other part of the game. But it's just the amount of time they put this out in. Like, they did this in the same span that we get, like, look Resistance to Resistance 2, look Uncharted to Uncharted 2. Just like what they did in such a short amount of time is so remarkable. And I echo all the same comments from them about the cinematics and the combat, but just it is like people are going back to the drawing board after playing this game, I'm sure, because like what they have set for an action adventure game, like whatever the Tomb Raider team thought they were doing, like they need to go rethink that, having played Uncharted 2, because that is the bar for these types of games going forward.
I mean, honestly, what is the bar now being set for Naughty Dog? I mean, I keep on pointing these out in all these interviews I've been doing on radio and stuff, but the whole idea that we have independently moving physics on top of moving physics, and that's what you see in the most dramatic sequences, the train sequence, the sequence in the very beginning when you're actually trying to climb up through the broken train hanging off a cliff. It's a tutorial. I still can't understand how genius that was. But in those moments, it's the stuff that probably most players won't appreciate, because it's not standing out. What you're appreciating is the overall effect, and I felt that it raised the tension to such a more exciting level. It made the camera move differently. You really had to sort of fight with the movements of the train when you're on top of it. I mean, it was just amazing.
It's funny you say that, because actually my favorite moment of the game, and I actually noticed, I believe it was Tom Bramwell at Eurogamer wrote their review, and he was saying the moment after everything goes down, when it chills out and it's in Tibet. Yeah. And it's just Nathan walking around, looking around the environment. Yeah. And like kicking a soccer ball to the kids and then trying to get them to like give them the ball back, or going up and interacting with one of the cattle. It's just like, it's such a great break from the action, but it just says volumes about what they can do with story, how much you care about the characters, how emotionally invested you are in them, and yet it shows off this amazing landscape in the background. Yeah. I mean, seriously, I'm planning to go back and replay it. I haven't had a game that grabbed me like this in about 3 years. Last one was probably for Gears of War. Yeah, I mean, it was just a weekend. I mean, I sat down Friday, forced myself to go to bed Friday night, and was up in my underwear with a cup of coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, trying to sneak out of the room, hoping my wife wouldn't hear me and make me do something.
It's one of those games that just won't let you go. Yeah. Just in the way that it's presented, and the way that the checkpoints are and the chapters are. It's like you just keep flowing and flowing into it, and there's no natural break for it.
The fact that so many of the checkpoints, the new chapters, unfold as you just like move along a hallway, and you just naturally fold into it, as opposed to, well, here's a break. Okay, I'm going to save. I'm going to quit. Like so many times, I think we probably all encountered where we just played one more chapter because like, well, that was a short chapter. And it just broke it naturally as like a new combat scenario came out. There was never, like they do that on purpose, I think, but it's also in some ways a disservice to the game, because I'm running through and barreling through so fast that this is the first time, and we'll see if I actually do it, that like I go through a section, I'm like, I really should have gone back and looked around, because like the attention to detail, I feel like because the game is barreling forward so fast, and it does that on purpose, like it's the forward momentum in this game is purposeful, but at the same time you feel bad that you're clearly probably missing so much of the game the first time around.
Go look at all these comments on message boards, and it's the same problem I had. I thought I was going to be collecting all this treasure, but the game became so distracting. I didn't even think to go like, hold on, let me just stop and go like look in every nook and cranny and try to find stuff.
After about the first half hour, I gave up on it. Like if I play it again, I'll look through it.
And not the narrative as the story, but that flow, that pacing of the game is so strong that you feel you're almost doing a disrespect to it by breaking away.
You're going against the current of the game.
It's kind of the problem is always like played me when I'm playing games with lots of side quests, because usually you're trying to save the world. You're like, well, hold on, I'll help that family too, and I'll waste 5 hours as the world's about to end. I mean, it was just I couldn't disrespect the story. I'm like, no, I'm gonna go shoot people.
See, it's interesting what you were saying earlier, Patrick, about how you just jump naturally into another chapter and it flows in. And I felt like they did a great job of that with the first game. Like a lot of these moments where you just happen to be wandering around, all of a sudden, boom, new chapter opens up. But I feel like they took a lot of the promise of the first game that kind of like, up until 2 came out, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune was my favorite game on PS3. And they've just polished and perfected and honed it until it's just undeniably, it's the best game on the console.
But no, in terms of that pacing too, I mean, it was very clear in the original Drake's Fortune that you could see, okay, that's a platforming sequence. Okay, now here's the combat sequence. In this,
it's much more organic.
Like I'm platforming, like, oh, combat's already happening, and I'm hanging off a ledge shooting.
It's not like you're going from combat arena to combat arena with adventure exploration parts in between. It's like you can get shot at pretty much any time in the game, and that keeps you on your toes. And I really like that about that.
Let's a couple quick words. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to spend much time with the multiplayer.
I played some last night.
Yeah, and I had a chance to check out the co-op, which, and I'll probably expand on this in a story in the feed this week, but that every bit of Uncharted 2, how it handles when you're with a second AI character to the co-op missions that it has in the multiplayer. Like, Uncharted does what Resident Evil 5, what I wish it had done. Like, it handles the AI character in a much better way. Well, that's a whole separate podcast. But it does, because like the moment in Uncharted 2, the first time that I had to hold triangle to boost like my AI character up, like I went into like slight convulsions because I was getting the RE5 flashbacks. It's like, if they do this to me, like I'm gonna be so upset. But they don't, and you have this AI character that helps and does not hinder throughout the entire game. At no point did I ever feel that the AI character was hindering my own quest. But at the same time, they take in the co-op missions some of the coolest sequences in the game that you would, as you're playing them single player, like, oh, this would be cool co-op, but I don't have to worry about someone else. You go back and play that separately in a co-op mission in the multiplayer, and it works phenomenally well, and it's so much fun. And I'm not one that tends to go and play multiplayer in games anyway, so like maybe you guys can speak to that a little bit more, but I definitely hope they are going to do DLC for the co-op missions, because those are things that I will return to and again.
They have said that they are going to do DLC. I think it'd be crazy it would only be multiplayer maps, because I think that the co-op is going to be one of the most talked about, probably the most talked about of the two multiplayer options that the game has.
I would agree. I mean, I haven't had a chance to delve in, also because I have to go back to my FIFA review. That was actually told somebody, like, Uncharted was so good it put me off my FIFA review.
Poor Sterling. If people out there, if you don't understand, Sterling's affection for the fine art of footy ball is so impassioned that is a very, very, very strong statement. Yep. I think that's all the time we're going to be able to give to Uncharted 2 today, which I think is fair given how much time we've probably given Uncharted 2 in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I do want to go to our reader question of the week from Not a Fanboy That I Know, all one word. Will it make sense for video games to be sold at $40? Developers can charge $7 to $15 for the online component. A constant flow of DLC could eventually make it more profitable for developers and the gaming community. This is an interesting question, but I also don't know if if that's even something feasible for the game industry to do.
I want to probably pull this back, because this is a large conversation and argument that's been going on in the feed lately after I put up an editorial about Halo 3 ODST, and I thought it was justified at $60, and the response from that was
everyone
like
hates you.
largely in the opposite direction, mostly because of Bungie's own missteps when they first announced the game, and they announced an expansion pack that would be $40. But there is a large conversation that's growing bigger and bigger in terms of, and we touched on this on feedback last week, we're like, well, Brutal Legend or Uncharted 2, it's that people only have so much money, and would it benefit the industry to have a more scalable price structure so that people would be more incentivized to buy, hey, I didn't buy ODST, but man, if that had been $40 for just the campaign, and I'm not going to play the multiplayer, which is what I did. I think people, the industry has this perception that if you're not $60, well, you're not a full game. You're not a AAA game. But I think the industry, it would be smart if we got more of a variable price structure, because I think people would be more incentivized to buy more games.
But I want it variable on quality, not on quantity of game. They said put their money where their mouth is.
Well,
Sterling?
Well, I'm just thinking about what would be a feasible model, and I could see if you digitally distributed a big game. Like, what comes to mind as soon as I was reading this was like Burnout Paradise, where Burnout Paradise was a full release, but the amount of support, the amount of DLC that went into it, they could have charged for it, and I think people would have been just as happy. That could have been, however they do Burnout in the future, could point towards something like this. To me, it's kind of a difficult thing to say from being on this side of the industry.
Right.
Like, how do you quantify how much money should go into a game and how much somebody should charge for a game?
You kind of have to look at what's happening like in social gaming, like Facebook games, where they kind of, and it goes back to our story about Dragon Age, is that you kind of have to give the base game to as many people as possible, and you hope that they start buying the DLC to make themselves think that they're getting the fuller experience. So prices can go down on games, $40, $30, $20, like Burnout. You will get significantly less content at that base, and you will have to pay, and they will incentivize it so you stay invested in their game, and you don't go buying other games that are doing the same thing.
I think the part that's funny is if we think about the games we've been discussing today, like this, Fallout 3, Dragon Age, Mass Effect 2, let's not talk about Mass Effect. these are games I don't think anyone would dispute the $60 price tag for the initial entry fee. You know, it's you know, and then everything else seems to be gravy. I mean, there are games out there that I don't think I would review them differently. But I'd find myself a little bit having an easier time plunking down the money and playing them if they were a little bit cheaper. But no DLC you could give me would probably make me want to go back and play that game. I mean,
look, one of the things I heard out of a lot of reviewers was when Wet came out about a month ago was that, hey, this game, it's not awful, but it's also not worth $60. Had this game been $30 or $40, the recommendations would have been much more widespread. But because the asking price for a game like that is $60, when you have just what is a stylistic, you know, slightly above average action game, like it's hard to tell people, no, you should go spend your money on this when there's other things that are coming out.
Because they actually tried with Wet, and they dropped it down to $50. But I think that's like still not quite hitting the sweet spot. You know, that's like a $50 game for this generation is the $40 game of the PS2 generation. Whereas the $40 game, you know, there's a question of quality there.
I mean, I think that's the other thing is I would not recommend Wet at $40 or $60. It's not a very enjoyable time. I mean, it's like sending someone to a restaurant. It's like, it's not very good, but, you know, it's cheaper than most. It's like, you're ensuring them that, like, yeah, you're going to walk out full and disappointed. You know, that's just it's one of those arguments I have a hard time with. You know, I mean, just hold the money back and spend $60 for something good.
Well, it's almost like an unspoken thing. There is an audience that likes B games. I don't think B games are as enjoyable as B movies.
Yeah.
But there's an audience.
Remember,
for
B
that.
movies became enjoyable years after. And, you know, it's because the interface with the movie has been pretty much standard ever since 1910.
There needs to be some sort of matinee format where, like, I wouldn't pay $12 to see this, but I would pay $7 on the afternoon.
Well, I think this has actually raised some very interesting questions. And I would not be surprised if this is a subject that we'll find ourselves revisiting, because I think, especially with digital distribution kind of looming out there on the horizon, these are questions that are being asked inside of the not the entertainment industry. Well, probably in the entertainment industry as a whole, not just the games industry.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is all the time that we have for feedback this week. I would like to thank my wonderful guests, Patrick Klepek, Andrew Pfister, Sterling McGarvey. I'm Adam Sessler, that guy that really annoys the crap out of you, and I'll do it again with this group and maybe more people next week on Feedback.